We're excited to see everybody back for today's final day of live sessions, and we're excited to get started again. And so with that, we'll roll right into the start of this session, which is all about innovations in pain management. Pain's a tricky thing. It can be hard to manage, and we know from the data that upwards of 85% of people who experience amputation may experience some form of pain. Today, we've got a great panel of experts who will provide their perspectives from government, from private sector, and from patient populations to help us through this discussion. Throughout this session, we'll be monitoring the questions in the chat box. So if you have questions for any of the panelists, please be sure to type them in, and we'll do our best to try to address some of those on the back end of the discussion. Before we get to our panelists, I want to highlight a couple of polls to the right side of the screen. Again, your participation helps us understand your experience. We can try to address them in today's conversations and for future resources and supports from the Amputee Coalition. We asked a couple of questions in there. First one, there's some questions about what you expect to get out of this panel, but we also have questions around, what kind of pain do you experience? Do you experience acute pain, which may last for a shorter period and maybe experienced following surgery or injury, and may gradually resolve itself? Do you experience chronic pain, which is usually ongoing, typically lasts a longer time, more than 6 months, and can be something that is exacerbated by different issues? And then, do you experience phantom pain or phantom limb sensation? When you feel the missing part of your limb or may experience pain from that portion of your limb that has been amputated. So share what kind of pain you've experienced, and also if you've had any challenges accessing the care that you need to manage your pain. As you all take the time to respond to those poll questions, I'll take a minute to quickly introduce our panel of experts. We're joined today by Dr. Linda Porter, who is the Director of the Office of Pain Policy at the National Institute of Health, the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke. We also have Dr. Leslie Tive, who's the Medical Director at Pfizer, a pharmaceutical manufacturing company that works to provide products that will help make a difference for patients. And Marc Boutin, who is the President and CEO of the National Health Council, which the Amputee Coalition is a proud member of. The National Health Council is a patient advocacy group that focuses on systemic issues such as meaningful access to high value and affordable care, and focuses on driving innovation in treatment and care for patients. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started with our panelists. And with that, I'd like to start out and welcome Dr. Linda Porter from NIH to provide us with her comments. Dr. Porter.
Great, thanks so much, Dan. I really appreciate the invitation to be here. It's a great opportunity for us and for NIH to share with your group some of the things that we're moving forward with as far as pain management through the work that we do as the largest biomedical research institute in the world. And so what I want to do today is to outline for you what's a little bit of a complex program that we have started that we're super excited about. As the opioid crisis hit the country and became an enormous problem as far as addiction, overdose, deaths, Congress recognized that we really needed additional funds to really build a research program that not only addressed reducing the overdose deaths and reducing the use of opioids and reducing addiction through better treatments, that we really had to focus on pain management as part of that program. Because without better pain management, we really couldn't move away from our heavy reliance on opioids. And so what we were able to do with the dollars that we got from Congress starting in 2018, we were given $500 million a year for the duration of how long it takes to address the opioid problem, improve pain management. And we were able to build infrastructure into the research program that we really haven't had the resources to do for years. We had been planning in moving in this direction and really had sort of a strategy built up as to how to go about enhancing the research program, but we really didn't have the funds to do it. So I have a slide that I'm presenting here that looks at the structure of the pain management side of this research endeavor. It does not include all the work that's being done related to opioid use and overdose. But if you look here, the program is called HEAL, Helping to End Addiction Long Term. And I've got a bubble chart there, if you will, on the left-hand side that shows you 2 bubbles related to pain. And the rest, the purple ones, are related to the research projects on addiction and opioid use disorder. So we have a pain mechanisms bubble, which tells you about a number of the sort of basic pain research programs that we have undertaken. And those are listed in the blue rectangular box in the very center of the screen. So you can see from these little descriptions that we're working through a whole list, sort of a sequential list of how do we understand pain better? How do we then begin to build better analgesics or drugs to relieve pain? Devices that can be more refined to do a better job with pain relief, understanding through individual characteristics who's more likely to respond to different pain treatments, so we can start to tailor pain management to the individual. And then on the column on the right-hand side, we move into the clinical infrastructure and research that we have started through this HEAL program. And these are studies that run from sort of observational studies over time without interventions that are helping us to understand why people develop chronic pain, how it affects individuals, and the types of characteristics that might help us understand how to better treat those individuals. We've also started what we call an early phase or phase 2 clinical trial network, which is where brand new drugs that haven't been used in humans or devices would be tested to see if they are safe. So the first step you want to take with a new drug is to make sure you test a small number of people, make sure there are no adverse effects that would keep the drug from being useful. And also just to get an idea of whether they're going to work in humans. We've also set up a large network to look at what we call comparative effectiveness research. So we would take, for example, 2 different strategies, which might be pharmacological approaches with different drugs, or they might be non-pharmacological. They would include things like acupuncture, massage, physical therapy, and look in specific populations what works best of those 2 treatments that we're comparing in this particular population. So it's a step towards getting what we know is safe and effective for some people into the clinic to get it to more patients to be more effective. And then we have a new program for what we call pragmatic trials. So these are big, real world trials where you would take an intervention, bring it into a healthcare system, and try and explore ways to how that healthcare system would take on an effective treatment and embed it into their program. So how you get patient access to that treatment, how you get patient reimbursement for that treatment, and how that treatment gets to the right people. So this is kind of a really large scale overview of this new HEAL project that we have set up a strategy for the first 5 years with some programs we've already funded and already started, including a number of large clinical trials. And we hope over that 5-year period that we will have new drugs for populations of people with certain pain conditions, new non-pharmacological approaches that haven't been reimbursed or available to certain people, and perhaps devices refined to help individuals manage their pain. The next slide is sort of an introduction to why understanding pain is so important to being able to then move on to develop better therapies. And pain associated with limb loss is a very unique area for many different chronic pain conditions. We know that there are changes not only at the site of an injury, but there are also changes in the central nervous system. And this central nervous system change is what makes that pain so persistent and so hard to treat. And so in many types of chronic pain, we see changes in what we call brain connections within, they're like circuits within the brain that are altered. And it's hard to back out of those changes in circuitry to make people feel better and to relieve their pain. With pain following amputation, it's even more complicated because the brain is disrupted in more unique ways in addition to just sort of the general changes we see with chronic pain, because our brains are set up to recognize where sensory, touch, feel, movement information goes into a certain part of the brain associated with a limb or body part. When that body part is lost, the brain circuits get confused, if you will, and that adds to the persistence of pain. At least we think that's one big contributor. In addition to that, we see changes in the peripheral nervous system. So the nerves that have been cut because of the amputation and the trauma to the limb itself, the information that's coming from those nerves. So a lot of the new areas of research for improving pain management for limb loss, for pain associated with limb loss, phantom limb pain, generalized pain, are using that information of what we know about changes in the brain and how they contribute to pain. And so one brand new study that has built on older technology and added some really new, really advanced technology is a system, this is funded through the HEAL initiative, that takes sensors that are implanted into prosthetic devices. And the research started initially as a way to help stabilize the device itself. But what they've done is they put sensors where you see the number 1 into the device that tells how much pressure is being put on the device. Is it in balance or is it off balance? And again, this is for stability. What they're doing is they're adding sensors that actually feed back to the device, and then through another couple of steps, which are in a little embedded sensor that actually goes around one of the nerves that's been cut because of the amputation. And that sends little signals up to the brain where the brain disorganization or reorganization rather has occurred after the amputation. And so the idea is to help your brain sort of reconnect in a more normal way in the hope that this will reduce the pain over time. So it's kind of a step up from some of the sensory stimulators, sensory neuromodulators that have been used fairly extensively for phantom limb pain in the past. So that's one example of where we're using some advanced technology to move forward. And some of the other programs that have started recently are sort of a next step in advancing what many of you probably are familiar with, mirror box therapy, where you basically sort of retrain your brain based on movement of an intact limb to match up in the brain what it sees as movement in the limb that's been lost. Again, it's sort of to reorganize the circuits in the brain that have been disrupted. But what we're adding to that now are a couple of different approaches. So to refine it a little bit, they're using virtual imagery to, instead of there's the mirror, it's a more accurate, more refined way where with the virtual glasses, which you've probably all seen through gaming and all that, that will reproduce what's happening in the intact leg and sends those visual signals and cues to the brain through the virtual therapy, the virtual cameras. So that's one way to improve the mirror therapy. Another way is to couple with mirror therapy a stimulation of areas in the part of the cortex that creates movements. So what you would target is you would be doing the mirror therapy and couple that with a probe just on the outside of your head. So nothing happens, it's just a sticky little probe that stimulates the part of the brain that would move the limb that is lost. And so between that coupled with the mirror imagery, the idea is to, again, sort of reset the circuits in the brain that are contributing to that chronic persistent pain. So these are some examples outside of the realm of the analgesic, the drug development programs that we have, which obviously could be very helpful to people with phantom limb pain, we hope in the future. And also the non-pharmacological therapy tests for things like acupuncture and massage. So I'll close with one last slide to tell you about a slightly different program that's not targeted specifically to amputee pain, but I think will be important to understanding and then better treating pain that occurs after a trauma or a surgery. And this is a program where we're looking at onset of pain through one study's being in people who are about to have a total knee replacement. We know that some of those people recover and over time do very well. We know that some of those people end up with chronic pain that can last for months or years. And what we also know, Dan mentioned earlier, that people who have an amputation, very traumatic injury, most of those people go on to pain. Many go on to severe pain. And the only other injury that's in that level of prevalence to chronic pain is spinal cord injury. And so again, it's something that's very hard to treat. So in these patients, we're going to look at a number of different things. We're going to look at their brain structure, their brain function, their genetic makeup, the inflammatory markers that happen after an injury, and then look at them again at 6 months and compare the people who feel better and don't have lasting pain to those who do have lasting pain, and try to determine if there are certain targets in those patients with lasting pain that we can focus on to help prevent that change from the acute pain situation to chronic pain. So let me stop there and we'll move on. I'll go back to Dan and he can take us off to the next speaker. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Porter. There's definitely a lot going on in the research space and in trying to develop solutions for our community and really, help people understand sort of different options available, both through the all through the different levels of pain, through different types of pain, but also through different solutions, both pharmacological and non-pharmacological, which is really encouraging to be aware of. The poll question feedback that we got from earlier shows that upwards of 70% of our attendees are experiencing different types of pain, which is consistent with the research. And I see that the chat box is moving pretty quickly today, which is, this is definitely a hot topic for a lot of people in the community. So thank you for that feedback and that perspective. Now I'd like to welcome Dr. Linda Tive, who will provide her perspective and some of the experiences and challenges, I think, in sort of developing new medications and treatments for pain. Dr. Tive?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for including me in your national conference and giving me the chance to participate in this panel. I'm very honored to be here. My name is Leslie Tive. I'm a Senior Medical Director of Global Medical Affairs at Pfizer Pharmaceuticals in New York City. Many of you, I'm sure, have heard of Pfizer. It's a very large pharmaceutical company. And depending on the metric that you use, it may even be the largest pharmaceutical company in the world. And we really have one purpose, and that is to deliver breakthroughs that change patients' lives. And we try to do that by applying science, and we have global reach to bring therapies to people that can extend and significantly improve their lives. And my training was as a neuropharmacologist. I did my doctoral research on morphine analgesia and how pain pathways change during development from newborns into adulthood. So I've been working in the pain field for a very long time. And I've also had a very long career at Pfizer. And during that time, I've had the opportunity to work on several innovations, innovative medicines to treat chronic pain. And the hope was that each one added a new benefit to patients and their caregivers. So these have included Celebrex, which we launched in 1998, and it was the first COX-2 specific NSAID that allowed people with chronic pain from osteo and rheumatoid arthritis and ankylosing spondylitis to get relief from their pain without increasing their risk of getting GI bleeds and ulcers. After that, we launched Neurontin, which had been on the market for a very long time as an anti-epileptic compound. But in 2002, we filed an application to get an approval for post-herpetic neuralgia, which added to the anti-epileptic indication by being the first compound approved for the treatment of neuropathic pain caused by post-herpetic neuralgia. In 2004, we launched pregabalin, or Lyrica, which had broader indications for different types of neuropathic pain and fibromyalgia, and a more precise and more predictable dose-response relationship than Neurontin had had. Now, we have been studying for over a decade a new compound called tanezumab, which is a monoclonal antibody against nerve growth factor that's currently under review by the FDA. And if approved, tanezumab will be an option for moderate to severe pain of osteoarthritis in patients for whom other medicines for chronic pain are inappropriate due to lack of efficacy, tolerability issues, or for patients who just don't choose to take an opiate for their chronic osteoarthritis pain. And each of these products has sought to bring in new treatment options to patients who suffer from chronic pain and to the healthcare professionals who treat them. And in fact, Linda was talking about the different stages of drug development a little bit, and it's been in the news lately with the development of the vaccine for COVID. None of the treatment options that I just mentioned or any other innovative medicines would be at all possible if it weren't for the patients who have advised us and also agreed to be in our clinical development programs and in our clinical trials. And in fact, making sure that we get the patient voice, patient opinions, and patient participation in each stage of the drug development process is really crucial in order for us to bring patients treatments that are really meaningful to them and can really help them and improve their lives. So I just want to take a minute to talk about the different stages of drug development and the ways that we involve patients in these different stages and how crucial the patient input that we get is to our process. So during the drug discovery phase, we need to make sure that we are looking for treatments for the right symptoms and the right diseases. We want to make sure that there are unmet needs that are being filled. We need to make sure that the treatments that we are discovering are going to be relevant to the patient community that we're trying to serve. And we also need to know, if the standard of care that patients are currently using are adequate, or if there's a therapeutic burden or issues that prevent these treatments from being enough for patients, so that there is a gap and a need for something new. During the preclinical stage, we are gearing up to start our clinical trials. So we plan, while we're doing our animal studies to look at efficacy and safety, we're planning for going into the clinic. So we are writing our clinical protocols, and we need patients to help us characterize the eligibility for these protocols, the inclusion and exclusion criteria that we're going to use. We need to make sure that the clinical endpoints that we're putting in our trials are relevant to patients and will be meaningful in our results. We also have patients, as you probably know, sign informed consent forms before they participate in our trials, and we get a lot of patient input to make sure that these consent forms are understandable to patients and that they know what they're signing up for when they sign up for our trials. We also, in phase 1 through 3, 1, 2, and 3, we need patients to help us with, input onto patient selection and recruitment. We need patients to educate and motivate each other to enroll in our clinical trials. We have patients that serve on our data, safety, and efficacy monitoring boards. And sometimes we have clinical trials that just put, that are just not working for patients, that the participants in the trials feel like they're just too onerous, or there's parts of the trials that are just too hard to participate in. And we get that input from the participants in our trials and can make amendments to those trials if they don't serve the needs of the patients who are participating in them. And then while we are going through FDA review, we have patients participate in public, give public testimony at FDA advisory committee meetings, and sometimes also come with us to FDA hearings about the disease state under study. And very crucially, once a product has made it to market, patients are a crucial part of post-marketing surveillance that we do, and to check that the compound is efficacious and safe once it reaches the larger patient community. At this point also, we go back to the patients who have participated in our clinical trials, and even patients who have not, and we present to them the results of our clinical trials, and we get feedback to make sure that our results are understandable to patients and that they're meaningful to the patient communities that will be taking our medicines. So I really just want to leave you now with the thought that patient participation in all aspects of drug development is crucial. We can't bring innovations to market without feedback from the patients who will be taking the compound. And it's really important to have that input so that we can bring patient therapies that will have a meaningful impact on their lives. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dr. Tive. I think it's really important to understand the focus that industry takes on developing new solutions. And, there are unique challenges with each type of pain, acute, chronic, phantom, that can't really be addressed with any one solution. So it's encouraging that patients are involved in the development process and that we really look at each individual need. And I've seen a couple of notes in the chat about clinical trials, and I know that there are a number of different ways to find clinical trials and options that are available in both the public and private sector. And those are all things that you may find value in looking into in order to understand and to help find future solutions. Clinical trials are vital for us to try to figure out sort of the next phase of drug development and improvement in care. So thank you again, Dr. Tive. Really appreciate your feedback there. Now I'd like to welcome Marc Boutin, who will talk a little bit about the National Health Council and the importance of patients in pain management and sort of this overall process and the importance of patient advocacy. Marc, I can welcome you on screen.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate the opportunity and have enjoyed the previous two presentations. As Dan said, I am the CEO of the National Health Council, which is an organization that was created by patient groups for patient groups 100 years ago. We've been around for quite some time. We work only on systemic issues, driving meaningful access to affordable healthcare and trying to ensure that we have meaningful innovation, both in the development of treatments for the more than 160 million people living with chronic diseases in the United States, as well as innovations in how we deliver care. And I want to speak a little bit about the patient community. As I said, the organizations have been around in many cases for about 100 years. And patient groups have played a critical role in driving public policy that has led to systemic change. And in fact, the community comes together to advocate for systemic changes under the National Health Council. And over the course of the last 15 years, we've been involved in every major piece of legislation that has had anything to do with driving innovation or access to care. And we continue to advocate for your groups. And I want to make a plug with the Amputee Coalition. Your CEO, Mary Richards, and Dan are longtime friends of the National Health Council and have been involved in this space, driving advocacy on your behalf for many, many years. I also want to point out that our power base is unlike other organizations you see in Washington, D.C. Many organizations have their source of power coming from money and their ability to influence through money. Our sources of power come from our reputation, from our expertise and our knowledge about the conditions we represent. But most importantly, our power comes from our grassroots. It's people like you listening to this session who care about people living with chronic conditions and work with your organizations to drive advocacy and public policy change. When we come together, we are such a powerful force that members of the administration, members of Congress step up and listen, and we're able to drive meaningful policy. So I encourage you to stay engaged with this organization, bring your family, your loved ones, your friends, and encourage them to engage in the issues that are important to all people with chronic conditions. And I just want to take a moment and explain how we do that. It's something we call the arc of public engagement. And it's a methodology that helps us to understand where we can have the greatest, most meaningful impact. The arc of public engagement is a very easy to understand methodology. It has three components. The first component is you need to have an understandable problem. Second component is you need to have a believable solution. Third part is it needs to be important enough to a large enough group of people that they will take action, do something different in their lives. And I actually think pain and pain management is the perfect example for what has happened over the course of the last several years. Like many conditions, the problems associated with chronic pain have largely been misunderstood from the perspective of people living with chronic conditions and chronic pain. So often, surrogates in the healthcare system, whether they be researchers, innovators, regulators, politicians, even our doctors, assume they understand the challenges of living with chronic pain. Now, they certainly have critically important perspectives. But as Leslie said, to truly understand those perspectives, you must engage with the people living with chronic pain. Far too often, because all of us experience pain from time to time, we make assumptions. We think we know. We have good intentions, but that doesn't mean that our assumptions actually mirror what's happening in the real lives of real people trying to manage their daily experience, manage work, manage raising children, and dealing with chronic pain. The problem has largely been misunderstood, and it coincided with a movement in the patient community, a movement that has been co-led by people like Dan and Mary to drive our researchers, our drug and device manufacturers, and even our doctors and people delivering care to start to engage with us to truly understand the outcomes that matter and how we rank or prioritize different outcomes. That's led to an opportunity, especially in these incredible challenging times of dealing with opioid abuse and addiction, to start to think a little bit differently. To the administration's credit, and in particular to the credit of NIH and FDA and others, they recognized that while that was a critical crisis, it was not a substitute for dealing with pain management. And it created an opportunity for us to look at pain management differently, to really explore the challenges faced by people living with chronic pain, and start to look at new opportunities to drive innovation, both in device and the manufacturing of medicine, but also in how we deliver care in a very, very different way. And it creates huge opportunities for us. And I just want to take one moment and say, I am not somebody with lived experience in limb loss, but I am somebody who has lived experience in pain management. I am a 3-time cancer survivor. During my second cancer, I had part of my brow, my cheekbone, my jaw, my chin, and half my teeth removed. And then I had it all put back together. Over a course of 9 weeks, I had 12 surgeries. And I still remember the challenges I had in trying to deal with pain management, trying to deal with the physical and emotional implications of going through those surgeries in a short period of time. And I always say, and I remember sharing this with leaders within the current administration a few years ago, it was really difficult to get that addressed. And yet there have been times when I've gone in for minor dental surgery and walked out with a prescription for 30-oxycodone. There's been some real challenges in how we deal with pain management, and there's been limited up until relatively recently, really interesting new innovation, driving new opportunities that can give us great advances in pain management. Because I can tell you, as somebody who's had to deal with some of the previous older treatments, quite frankly, they suck. They create sexual dysfunction, emotional dysfunction, cognitive dysfunction, constipation, all kinds of challenges that make it really hard for people to live their lives. What we're looking for are for new innovations that will allow us to address what's important to us. And this leads to my last point that I want to make for this group. Wellness is not simply about biology. Wellness is much different. Wellness lies at the intersection of all the determinants of health, which includes biology, critically important, but it also includes social and economic determinants of health, the environmental determinants of health, even in many respects includes systemic racism. Wellness lies at the intersection of all the determinants of health and our desired outcomes. Because what I want from pain management may be different from what you need from pain management. We're all living complex lives, and we want to live our best life possible. And we're looking for health, medicine, to help us deliver on that. You have two people here from NIH, been doing some incredibly exciting things that are really innovative and new and different. And you have a biopharmaceutical company here that is truly engaging with patients to really understand the outcomes that matter to you and how you prioritize them to deliver on new options that will help you live a better life. Last thing I want to say before I turn this back to Dan is this: speak truth to power. This movement, cultural phenomenon of customizing our lives has begun to move to health. We're seeing it in research. We're seeing it in drug and device development. We're just beginning to move it into how we deliver care. And it can be very difficult when you're sitting on a table in a doctor's office, half naked, and a doctor comes in with 5 students behind them and then tells you what you need. No, step up, tell them what is bothering you and how you would like the healthcare system to help you live your better life. We're doing a lot with the Amputee Coalition and the rest of the patient community to drive this movement into the delivery system. And I'll be the first to admit they're not yet as receptive as they need to be, but we need to step it up and we need to demand it. And if you don't get it from your providers, go to somebody else. With that, I'll turn it back to Dan. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, everybody. That was a really helpful and valuable conversation around the research, the innovations in management, and sort of our role as patients in this process. I think we're buttoned up on time a little bit, but I do want to make sure we try to get to at least 1 or 2 questions here. One of the questions that came up was around what types of other interventions or research is being done out there about non-addictive pain management options and treatments, or maybe natural remedies or other sort of solutions that way within pain management.
Sure, Dan, I can touch on a couple of those things. So the analgesic development program actually takes biologics in through the pipeline or the pathway of looking at if they're effective at the molecular level as potential analgesic, if they can be customized to be used appropriately in humans, and then taking them up through the phases of testing for safety. So it does include biologics. And one of the institutes at NIH has begun a registry, if you will, of biologics and what their potential uses might be. So this has gotten to be an incredibly important resource, because there may be substances in there in that biologic registry that we never thought would be useful for pain. But now we sort of have tapped into it, and maybe can start running those through some of our programs to see if they could potentially be useful for pain relief. So there's that part of it. There's a lot of work on non-pharmacological therapies for different pain conditions. So we are trying to bump up what used to be a fairly small program on looking at effectiveness of things like acupuncture. Mindfulness has gotten to be a big source of help for a lot of people with pain. And so we're looking to see like what pain conditions, what particular people, according to their characteristics, their cultural background, whatever, would be most receptive to some of these non-pharmacological treatments. So we're looking at it from a lot of different levels. The new non-pharmacological treatments they're maybe not so new, but they're the ones that people have used on their own, knowing that they're effective, like yoga, Tai Chi, acupuncture, that haven't really been accepted by the people who pay for those therapies, your insurance companies or your healthcare system. And so having research done in those particular areas that say there is evidence to show that they are effective. Acupuncture is effective for low back pain. Tai Chi is effective for knee osteoarthritis. So we're trying to get some of those through the system in order to help people get access to them. And using things like telehealth and checking on that to see how we can get that to rural patients or people in low socioeconomic status who can't get into a clinic on a daily basis or can't pay a doctor. So there are a lot of different approaches to getting those kinds of therapies out to the patients.
Excellent. Thank you for that. One sort of final question here before we close out. I know we're buttoning up time against some of the other sessions that'll start shortly here. There are a lot of great sessions this afternoon that'll follow up on some of these things and are more specific to certain types of pain. But in terms of, when you're looking at our poll of the community on how pain affects them, it's pretty evenly split among chronic pain and acute pain. A lot of folks have experienced phantom pain, and a lot of people have experienced all three. So when you're looking at challenges that people face or things like that, when it comes to acute pain management techniques or chronic pain management techniques, if there's confusion between acute and chronic pain, does anybody have any recommendations on who might be able to help figure that out?
To figure out the definition, you mean, Dan, of what?
Sorry, just in terms of in terms of what your solutions might be between acute pain and chronic pain, and even phantom pain. If there might be recommendations about who to talk to or how to talk to professionals about your pain management techniques.
Right. So one thing that's happening is that the FDA is putting together treatment guidelines that are best practice guidelines for different types of acute pain conditions, which have kind of been all over the place. So your provider might be reading one from a certain organization or might be reading one from a federal agency. But the FDA is almost ready to release that. Like acute pain management is actually quite different and can be, if done appropriately, a preventive measure for developing chronic pain. So what we're trying to figure out with some of our studies and what the FDA is trying to pull together for clinical practice guidelines is what's been used in the clinic for acute pain that can help people from moving into chronic pain. So your provider can help you with that. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily have to be a physician, a physical therapist can help. And then you move into the specialty care clinics where it's mostly chronic pain management. And those are the folks that know that best. Leslie looks like she's ready to say something. I'll stop.
No, I just want to sort of add to can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes. I just want to add to what Linda said and also what Marc said. And I think that we've spoken with many patients who have chronic pain in the course of trying to develop new therapies for that. And one of the things that we found is what might work for me in terms of being a non-pharmacologic treatment may not work for you. So I might like to do aquasize. You might like yoga. There's not one size fits all. So I think, and the same is for acute and chronic pain. Some people, and we all worry about the chronification of pain going from being acute to turning into chronic pain. And so I think that what Marc said about, talking to your physician and telling him or her your story, and what is unique to you as a patient, which won't be like the patient who came in before, the one that's coming in next, is speaking truth to power and telling them about what works for you, what doesn't work for you, what you've tried. I think that conversation in pain is not always the easiest one to have because it's considered to be a subjective thing, but it's a crucial one to have, and we really need to all work together to fix that conversation, I think.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that. And thank you everybody for joining us today. I know we're butting up against time, so we hope you enjoy the next sessions this afternoon. We've got a lot of great sessions that talk about different strategies for pain management today, different areas of self-care and self-advocacy. So please make sure to check some of those things out in your schedules, and appreciate your time today. And thank you to all of our presenters for coming today and providing their insight.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.